Back once again for the renegade master. 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 Back once again for the renegade master.
Hello my renegades and welcome back, and we are back to Married at First Sight UK series 10. We are now getting into episode 8. Again, I apologise, I'm trying to be more consistent with my videos, but as you know, I work, so I'm very busy throughout the day, and then family things happen, and then it's sometimes not until late at night that I actually get to lay down some videos. But that being said, I do watch the episodes, so let me just put that out there. I just need to catch up on getting this content out for you. Anyway, before we get into this episode, as I always ask, please hit that subscribe button, please hit that notification button so we know I'm doing videos. Please comment, like, share and do the good things that you do, because I continue to be on the road to 1k. So now, after the fateful dinner party, we are all back on track for Confessions of the Couch time. Yeah, that's what I call that, the Confessions of the Couch, because that's all I seem to think that they're doing, that they're literally just confessing what it is that they've been getting up to in their relationships. Although they call it the commitment ceremony, I don't see much commitment going on with these people at the end of the day. So we know that Davani and Julia Ruth ended up spending the night apart, and this is what I mean when it comes to this type of situation, like with Anita and Paul. My thinking is, why are they still there? Why are they still going to try and struggle through in a situation where they know it's clearly not working with this person, and not even on the same levels? They're on different energy planes altogether, is Julia Ruth and Davani at the end of the day. And if that dinner party didn't say something, I don't know what will. Julia Ruth automatically knows, as does Davani, that they're struggling compared to some other couples. So she was mad, as we knew, that he was painting this picture that everything was hunky-dory when it was not. Davani is still making excuses as to why he was doing what he was doing, instead of accepting clear responsibility for the lies that he put out there about their marriage when he knows it wasn't true at the end of the day. Because in essence, you're kind of making your wife look like a dickhead, because she's telling people what the truth of it is and you're sitting there lying, and then you have people thinking, well, who's telling the truth here at the end of the day? So he basically uses the words that he sugar-coated things. No, you didn't sugarcoat, my love. You lied. You straight out lied about the status of your marriage at the end of the day. You were perpetuating this view that him and Julia Ruth were yin and yang. They were like that. Do you know what I mean? He truly played himself. He did. He played himself. I'm like, you didn't learn your lesson from the honeymoon at the end of the day. And this ain't the first time that these two have slept apart. Let's just put it that way. So we see Nelly and Stephen, and basically Nelly's apologising to him for crying at the dinner due to the honesty but question, and the discussions then coming from that. I don't think Nelly has anything to be sorry for at the end of the day, because this is what this show is supposed to be about, is showing your vulnerability to the person that you like, hoping in essence that they'll accept you. Stephen basically doesn't let her know anything. He just nods his head and looks at her. It's kind of like the proverbial noggin dog every time Nelly speaks. That's how I see him to be. He says what he needs to say up to a point, but my thing is with Stephen is that his words don't belly his actions, so they don't always align. So when he's speaking, his words and his actions are showing something different, that I'm going to class the words that are coming out of your mouth as out and out lies at the end of the day, and I'm going to formulate a view on the person that you're showing me to be. So Nelly basically talks about how she's getting into her own head and she's overthinking at this point. But she is also on that plane where she doesn't want to scare Stephen or give him the ick. Basically, she ends up convincing herself that Stephen don't want her, like if he hasn't held her hand that day, if he hasn't given her a kiss, if he haven't given her a hug. I don't know. But all I'm going to say is that level of reaction that Nelly is having is coming from somewhere at the end of the day, and it is starting to come out that the behaviours of how Stephen behaved on the honeymoon to how he's behaving now towards Nelly and with Nelly is completely changed. So This is where I also say that the breakdown for Nelly is going to happen, because she has these thoughts going on and they'll continue, and they will get the best of her at the end of the day. It's going to be for Nelly on how she's going to manage those thoughts, manage the behaviours coming from that, in order to see if she can reconnect with Stephen. But then it's also up to Stephen as well to give her that reassurance, especially if she's seeking reassurance from him. He should not be afraid to give her that. Either way, I think these two who actually started out strong are going to struggle at some point. So then, like, they go over to Grace and Ashley, they go over her wedding day and stuff like that. Yes, Grace has got to a point of relaxation with Ashley, but my question is are they stuck in the friend zone? Because that's what it seems like to me, that they're stuck in that proverbial friend zone at the end of the day. So Ashley does ask her though, like, if Grace was to get emotional on the couch, what does she want him to do? Which is actually insightful of Ashley to ask, bearing in mind that Grace doesn't necessarily like touch, and definitely when she's stressed out she don't like to be touched at all, because Ashley's natural reaction is to give her a hug. So Grace says, like, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm kind of thinking, no, you should let him know now what to do in the event, yeah, that you may not want to be touched, but you still want to have reassurance from him. Especially if Ashley's sitting there thinking, I want to make it better, but then I don't want to make it worse on top. Because he could sit there looking like a freaking spare limb at the end of the day. He could go in for a hug and she could literally say, don't touch me, like that. And it's going to be embarrassing for him too. So I think she needs to think about that. Kia and Maeve do end up going to the couches by themselves because Joe and David are not very well. So Leah basically is talking to the cameras about what she wants from the experience of going to the couches, and she's the optimist, the ever optimist, just as Dean is the ever optimist here, because they want the experts to tell them like where they're going wrong, because Leah has the feeling that with Lee it is a little bit more than friends, but Lee's still not at the stage of wanting to rip her clothes off basically. And I just thought, yeah, Leah, that's a tall order. That is a tall order for someone like Lee, because she is the type of person where if she really wants you, she would actually show it if she really wanted to do so. But right now she's stuck in that phase of, I ain't showing you nothing because I don't feel that way about you at the end of the day. I mean, the way that Lee looks at Leah sometimes, she has got the best RBF face. The best RBS face, because she looks at like that girl like with disdain in her eyes. It really is. So Lee's saying that being vulnerable and being open doesn't come naturally for her at the end of the day. So she says it's not something that she is choosing to do when she's not being open with Leah. But to be fair, I would say you do choose who you let in and who you don't at the end of the day. So don't get the whole premise that she's holding that with how she is, she's not choosing to be this way. She just believes that she has this blockage there and she can't get past that blockage. But isn't it going to be Lee's choice on whether to get that past that blockage she is going to trust in what she possibly could have with Leah? Yeah, because if she don't, then she's choosing to literally stay stuck where she is. So that's why I'm saying that it is a choice that she's making. So then we get to Anita and Paul. Let's just say there's no difference between them two, yeah. And it's not surprising that Anita is struggling with the emotional connection. Paul talks about how opening up emotionally has always been a struggle for him. And I'm like, we can tell, mate. Make no mistake about that, we can tell. But my thing is if he wants this to work with Anita, he needs to know who he is, and for him to take an interest in her. That's the basic level of being interested in someone, is taking the basic interest in them enough to ask questions about them. Because I'm literally tired of hearing these people talk about, I have these barriers up. My thing would be is to literally don't come on shows like this then. Fucking heal first, and then decide if you want to come on a show like this. When you are built like freaking fork bloody knocks, yeah, it ain't going to do anyone no freaking good, because you're just going to ruin the experience for the other person that you've hitched a ride on, basically. So Sarah and Dean, I'm sorry, but to me, when they camera pan to them, it kind of looked like he was treading on eggshells with her, because it was awkward as hell within that environment at this point in time. She was so dismissive of him. Each and every time he talks, it just seems to get worse with her attitude towards him, and it's just kind of like every time Dean talks, it irks the frick out of her and she just wants him to shut up. That's the reaction that I'm getting every time I watch her trying to have a conversation with Dean. Yeah, she's still doing the comparison game with all the other couples, and she's saying that like she's not where she imagined her and Dean to be. And I'm like, no love, it's not where you imagined it to be, because you don't like Dean. You didn't try with Dean from the moment that you met him at the end of the day, so it's going to be exactly where you're supposed to be. So Dean, as with Leah, God love them both, is ever optimist. He likes Sarah at the end of the day. I don't know how he could with the way how she's been treating him at the end of the day, but he don't know what the fuck she's been saying behind his back. He doesn't know the fact that she's been utter disrespectful behind his back. And I wonder what will happen when that arises, because you know that conversation is going to get pushed out when they get to the couch. It definitely is. So, as again, with some of the others, I'm still questioning why she's still here. So she sits there and turns around and she's saying that she don't know what the experts will do for her to be able to get a spark for Dean. She says she genuinely doesn't know if they are going to get to it. I would agree with her, to be honest, the not knowing part, as she knows that she ain't going to get no spark with this man. No spark, no sexual feeling, no nothing, because she don't like Dean like that. She wants the persona of Dean, because he's a lovely man. And I really think he's a proper good looking man too, at the end of the day. But she doesn't want the package that it's in. So no amount of cajoling is going to get her there. She might as well cut her losses and leave at the end of the day. So now we get to confessions of the couch time. So Grace and Ashley go up first. Grace talked about how she felt initially, and Ashley said like it made him want to spiral as well when she was spiraling herself, because he didn't necessarily know what he'd done wrong. They talk about like the different styles of touching, and he recognised he was making it worse every time he wanted to be tactile with Grace, because that's in his nature. So Grace literally talked about the fact that, you know what, it's more or less something she'd grown up with. Like for a long time she's just not liked skin to skin contact, and it made her feel like a freak basically. She does say like, you know, when she sees everyone else touching, it felt so natural. You do see the camera when she said that pan to Sarah and Dean, and they looked at each other in shock as if to say, yeah, we ain't fucking touching either, mate, so don't worry about it. Do you know what I mean? So I would say, as I said, I'm not no specialist or nothing like that, but the way in which Grace is talking about it, either some trauma-filled thing happened for her that makes her not feel comfortable being touched, or she has proper sensory issues at the end of the day. All I'm going to say is that maybe she needs some deep-seated therapy to open, unlock and understand why she is the way she is, because it's impacting her and her relationships. So they talk about how much progress they've made, and they both made decisions to stay. So we go to the next couple, Julia, Ruth and Devani. So these two are on the same level when they talk about the wedding, that they were both vibing, and they were vibing at the wedding. So Julia Ruth says that it was when she got to the honeymoon that she kind of felt overwhelmed, and that's when she questioned the vibe, like the disconnect in that sense, from the wedding to the honeymoon, and then literally the next day she was not on it at all, like seriously not on it. I do believe that, you know, Julia Ruth is probably looking into things more than she needs to. She said the physical didn't come naturally to her in regards to Devani, and I just took that to mean that, you know, she, you know, likes her tall men. Devani's a little on the short side. She says that he's too intense, he's too heavy, he's too deep, but she neglected to say one thing which she'd been saying throughout the honeymoon, is that Devani was boring. He just didn't know how to have fun. So I don't know if him being intense and heavy and deep is the bit that she's trying to say quietly, is that this man is boring as hell. So as she goes in, basically, on the camel ride and what happened there, and the fact that, you know, she'd asked Devani what his deepest fear was, and she said instead it wasn't banter-filled, it wasn't fun, it wasn't straight off the bat he just literally started to get really, really deep. So Paul stops her and says, but you asked him what his deepest fear was, and to be fair, Devani was telling you what his deepest fear was. At the end of the day, Paul, I would agree with him, fears are dark, they are, but Julia Ruth says in what Devani was spilling out, she just felt overwhelmed by the amount of information that he was giving her, and it felt like he was trauma dumping on her basically. But to be fair, from what I've watched from Devani, unless they're not showing the ins and outs, well, they ain't showing the ins and outs of their relationships bit by bit in that sense, or their conversations, it doesn't necessarily depict that Devani is negative all day, every day. That's all I'm going to say. That is all I'm going to say, because now they've ended up having 2 arguments, which has caused them to sleep apart at the end of the day. So Devani was answering her question. He says on fears in a personal level, because it was personal to him, but he said the same thing. He felt that it was just him opening up and becoming more vulnerable, but then it got turned into something else. So Julia Ruth does mention, like, you know, Devani glosses over, and then once he glosses over, he gets his back up, and then when he's upset he gets more intense, and then he doesn't back down, and she feels that force coming from him, because when he doesn't back down he starts stepping to her. And I'm just like, this is the short angry man syndrome. I told you this man needs help with that anger. He needs to keep that in check, because it ain't on to make somebody feel that way in terms of having a discussion with them, that it turns so volatile that that person then literally has to go and sleep in another place away from you. So again, Devani is excusing his behaviour by saying, I need to just get things off my chest. But that doesn't mean you go at a person like that. If you wish for them to listen to what it is you have to say, you can't get explosive with them at the end of the day. And Devani does admit that the discussion got explosive, which ain't good for anybody's relationship or wedding. So Paul does ask, like, how do you feel about your marriage, like when you walked into the dinner party? Devani started to look nervous, because we all know this man lied up and down the motherfucking street. Let me just put it that way. He lied to everybody that would hear, yeah. And we knew this was going to come out, because, you know, the experts sit at that place and watch them during the dinner. So Julia Ruth said, like, we had a conversation and they'd agreed before going in there that they would be on the same page if anyone asked. I thought, yeah, Devani, he skipped that messaging, he skipped that conversation altogether at the end of the day. But then I would also say, on the flip side, with Devani saying he wants to be an inspiration to the other couples, and that they were strong and yada yada yada, and that they would go in as a united front, yeah. She knew what type of time Devani was on from that conversation, but she did nothing to stop it at the end of the day. So Paul asked, like, what happened after the dinner party. Devani was getting put in the hot seat. So he basically said that Devani came back to the apartment. He confronted Julia Ruth. He says he was getting things off his chest. I was just like, mate, you weren't getting things off your chest. You literally were having a go at her, yeah, because I think he believed Julia Ruth was not having his back and going back on a narrative that he thought that they'd agreed to share. That's what that argument was about at the end of the day. Julia Ruth does interrupt him, and she does that quite often, you know, where she likes to interrupt him when he's actually speaking, which is quite rude, yeah. And basically she says it isn't him getting things off his chest. He literally verbally attacks her. She then tells him to go off somewhere and breathe, and then come back once he's calmed down, because you can't talk to me like that. And I would agree with her there. No, he shouldn't be talking to her like that. And then when Julia Ruth is saying this, you can see the absolute side eye from Devani. He's giving her side eye hard. Yeah, he don't like what is being said. He really don't like what is being said. But you see, the thing with Devani is he knows when to pull it on and off, because he won't play that shit in mixed company. He waits until they're behind closed doors and he's got her by himself. Now, I'm not saying this man is an abusive person, so don't infer that with my words. I'm just saying the majority of the explosiveness that happens is when they're away from everybody else. So they asked Devani like what he wanted. Devani talked about how he wants a companion, he wants someone to know him, and he wants someone to have fun with, and he still wants all of that in Julia Ruth. So they asked Julia Ruth what she wants, and I thought, yeah, she might say someone taller, but I hope to God she didn't, or maybe not so boring, because those were her issues with Devani, to be honest with you. But she's not going to say that out loud. She really isn't. She's going to skirt around it, but she's not going to say it out loud. So she basically said that she wants someone who will match her energy. So after all of that, yeah, she turned around and she said she doesn't mind being there for Devani or for him offloading to her at the end of the day. She feels out of anyone, she wants him to be able to have more fun. She just wants to have more fun with this man. They do say to Devani, like, you know, when he gets in that soapbox of his, that he needs to listen to Julia Ruth as well. He does not do that well at all. So Devani couldn't just do, when they got to the decision bit, Devani couldn't just do the decision and be done. No, he has to talk about how things have been proper difficult throughout the honeymoon, and I'm just like, mate, just say you're staying and be done with it at the end of the day. We don't need to hear a whole freaking epilogue or whatever the frick they want to call it. Forget the fanfare. You're staying or you're not staying. That's all we need to say. So they both said that they were staying at the end of the day because they wanted to work it out. So the next couple was Rebecca and Bailey. Nothing to really write home about with them. Them two have got connection. They had started to get the connection from the honeymoon. They're really liking each other. I like them together. End of. Next one. They decided to stay. So the next couple, Sarah and Dean. Let me just say, this was not an easy one for them. This was not an easy one for them. So they go over the wedding. Dean is nervous. You can tell he's hella nervous. But Sarah's sitting there all poised. And I'm like, yeah, mate, you won't be that poised for long. Let me tell you. So Dean checked, like, you know, that he was physically attractive to Sarah and he was sexually attractive to her as well. And yeah, Dean is funny, but I think each time Dean says funny things, Sarah laughs, but to me it's over exaggerated. They basically go to Sarah and say, what were you expecting? Because she does turn around and she says that Dean was not what she was expecting when she did walk down that aisle. So she says, you know, someone covered in tattoos, someone who looked like they had just come out of jail. You could see Dean's face, and although he was trying to plaster and smile on it, he was fully dejected hearing this because he knows that's not him. That's not him at all. Now he knows exactly what it is Sarah was hoping for. You don't fit the motherfucking bill. Asked her, like, you know, well, what else? Because we all know where he was taking her with this. She wanted a slimline or a gym type of guy. And I'm like, will she tell the truth? Will she honestly tell the truth? And she did, so I'll give it to her. She says, you know, I do tend to go for a guy that's into fitness and the gym. You can see the other couples, especially Leah, looking nervously at each other when they realise that not only was Sarah saying that Dean was not her type at all, and that he was unattractive to her, because let's call a spade, that's what she was saying. It was because he was on the bigger side too. That's essentially what she was saying when she says, well, like, I like a guy into fitness and goes to the gym. That's what she's saying. So the fact of it is Dean still sat next to her like a nodding dog. And I'm like, you will continue to nod your head and say yeah, but you can tell that he's truly hurting by the answers that are coming out of this woman's mouth. Because again, this is the first time that he's hearing this. So yeah. So Sarah turns to Dean and says, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm like, mate, you've done hurt them. You've done hurt them already. Dean turns around and like gives her the out that she needs. Oh, don't worry, you didn't hurt my feelings. But you can see it written all over his face. You could see it written all over his face. This woman didn't say any of this to Dean, as again, he's hearing it for the first time. So he knows, basically, it's you, mate. It's you she don't like. It's you she can't get attracted to, because she wanted her type, even though she's meant to be here to get away from that, because it's not worked out for her in the slightest. So they said, like, right, let's move on to the honeymoon. Sarah pulled her face. I said, if you blinked, you would miss it at the end of the day, as she must have thought, oh God, because she told the camera that Dean would have to lose weight and get tattoos before she found him attractive. So she better hope that they don't bring this shit up. So Dean is talking about how he had a wobble on the honeymoon, as Sarah literally didn't like it when he sang or rapped. And like, you're already putting excuses into him to appease this woman. He's already taken away a part of his personality that means a lot to him, because he sings and he freaking raps to show what he's feeling during each time. That's why he does that. The words of whatever it is he's singing is how he's feeling at that time, because he doesn't know how to verbalize it. Sarah basically said that she was getting irritated, yeah. But again, it's the way Dean shared his emotions, so she was effectively shutting his voice down, and she didn't realize that. I'm telling you when I say this was the most uncomfortable couch session I've ever watched throughout maths. This was it. It was bad. It wasn't good. And Sarah was not coming off good, even to all the others listening in, basically, to what was happening. So Dean admitted, like, you know, he was feeling sad during the honeymoon. And why Sarah looked so shocked is beyond me. She treated the man like garbage. She treated him like hot garbage at the end of the day. So Dean speaks about, like, the meal that they had, and him feeling that he'd reverted back to the little fat kid in school he was trying to foot in. And I was like, oh, Dean, poor Dean. Like, seriously, poor Dean. So he says, I've not been like that in so long. And then that's when all the doubts crept in. And it was Sarah who made him feel this way. It was Sarah who made him feel this way. And she's sitting there like she's hearing this for the first time. She's not, because he tried to say this to her on the honeymoon and she wouldn't accept it. She dismissed him when he tried to raise it. So Paul goes back to like asking why Dean felt like that. And Dean said, like, when he looked at Sarah, in all honesty, he had a bit of rejection. And this is when that girl shows that whole facial feature, like she smells a fart, as if to say, no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. It's basically her literally saying, I don't want the responsibility of what it is that you're saying or what you're trying to put on me. At the end of the day, she doesn't feel she needs to be held accountable for how Dean is feeling when she is the root cause of it. So Paul asked Dean, like, what was it that made you feel rejected and not enough? At this point, Sarah's put her head down. She is not as upright as she was and confident when she sat on that couch at the first time, let me know, because she knows she's getting fully exposed out there, yeah. So Dean said, like, the physical attraction thing hits him more than he thought it would do. I told you, Dean now realizes he will never get Sarah the way he wants her, because she doesn't like him like that. So you can see what Dean said struck a chord with Leah and Grace. Leah had actual tears in her eyes when she was hearing exactly what Dean was exposing and talking about, basically. So Paul asked, like, when you leave the honeymoon, were you all optimistic about your marriage? Dean said, yeah. I was super optimistic, because he was like, we get on. Like, there's no one else I'd rather be in than this. I'm telling you, Dean has reverted to type. This is what Dean does in each and every one of his relationships when he knows that the girl is not attracted to him, basically. But in the flip side of it, he's also trying to temper his reactions and how he feels, so Sarah won't get hurt and be the brunt of whatever it is that's coming forward. He's still trying to protect her, although he's in a world of hurt. So they asked Sarah if she was optimistic about their marriage as well. So she lies straight out the bat and says she was optimistic and that they were matched for a reason. I thought, mate, at the dinner you said you wanted the experts to make you understand why you were matched with Dean in the first place. So I'm calling BS on that front. Absolutely calling BS, because at this point Sarah's in damage control right now, because everything that she said and how she'd gone in, he's coming back to bite her in the motherfucking ass. Like, she literally sits there and explains like how overboard she can go when she has an initial attraction to someone. And I'm like, you've got this man sitting here listening to all of that and you can't do that with him. That's a bit of a piss take at the end of the day. So Paul breaks it down for Sarah on what she wanted in terms of the guy that she wanted. She says she has everything else with Dean, but she won't even try with him. That's the bloody problem. That's what it boils down to. She won't try with him because she's not attracted to him, because he's not her type in the slightest. If he was not so big and he was tall, tanned and tatted and had the personality of Dean, she would have been all up on him like a snake up a motherfucking drain pipe. Make no mistake about that. She would have done that. So I get she doesn't want to come off as a monster to Dean yet, and the others, but she needs to stand on what she said about this man and how she portrayed herself to the others about this man at the end of the day, because no one made her do it. She did that herself, but she thought it was funny when she was doing it, ridiculing the man. So Dean does say that, you know, he has been saying to her, like, I'm the husband that you want, not what you need. And Sarah says, like, she doesn't want Dean to change, but she does. She does. She wants him to change his appearance. She wants him to get tattoos. She wants him to stop feeling songs through rapping and singing because it irks her. She just don't want him. And as she's doing that, she's literally dimming his light. And it's sad to see Dean literally in his mannerisms sinking back and defending Sarah in the way that he does, like it's almost his fault that she don't like him. I didn't like that at all. I didn't like it at all. Either you accept Dean for who he is, and faults and all, whatever it is that freaking hurts you, because Dean is a lovely looking man and he has such a great personality to boot. So Paul said to Dean, so he's receptive to modifying his behaviour. So they asked Sarah, what behaviour are you modifying? And I thought, that's the question. That's the $1 million question, because this girl's going to say nothing. This girl is going to say nothing. My girl does. She thinks she's doing everything okay. And this is what it looks like when you see a person that can't see their own faults in themselves and accepts no responsibility in regards to their behaviours, because it's everybody there around them that must change how they are so it doesn't irk her. This is why I kept on saying Sarah has turned into the people that she dated previously. And then of course Sarah then turns to Dean for help, because she's like, I'm stuck, I need you to save me at this point. And Dean, God love him, becomes her saviour. So Mel does say that, Dean, what we are seeing here is you rescuing Sarah in this, not Mel, Charlene. Because hand on heart, Dean knows Sarah ain't trying at all. He is the one continuing to breathe affirmation into this marriage, and she just harps on about how the attraction is not there for them. So they said to Sarah, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to change? She says, I don't know. I just thought it ain't beneficial going down this road with Sarah, because she don't see a problem in the current situation she's in. There's no getting past that at all. That's all I've got to say. So Paul said, I've got something for you. And he said, you can begin by stop disrespecting your husband. I was like, Paul, is that how we're going on the couch right now? Is that how we're calling people out on the couch right now? Even Sarah was like what? Because Sarah looked confused as hell. And I'm like, my girl, did you not watch any of other masks to know that when you are at the dinner party, there's freaking microphones and cameras everywhere, and the experts do sit and watch what you're doing and how you're conversing with each other. So they saw you going to every other couple and ripping the piss out of your motherfucking husband. That's what they saw. So Paul took Sarah down memory lane, basically. He took her a trip down memory lane to the dinner party and the nasty uncalled for things she said about Dean. So Paul said, if someone disrespects you, what are you doing? So Sarah answered, like, you're being rude, you're being mean. So Paul asked Sarah, Do you think you were being rude? Sarah said no. She thought what she said was okay. Sarah did turn to Dean and said, well, maybe I had said you had given me the ick. I was like, raw. Even Bailey said when Dean realises the truth, this will kill him. And it will, as his insecurities will resurface like 100%. Sarah is trying to play it like she is innocently explaining her behaviour away and wanting Dean to accept what she said, or wanting Dean to believe what she's saying enough to rescue her and not believe in terms of what it is that the experts are trying to make him realise, basically. So Paul ended up fully pulling Sarah up. Sarah really said she didn't realise she was laughing at him, like in terms of the rude things she was saying. And I mean, but you were sat there and you were literally laughing at this man in terms of saying, oh, he says that, you know, he was the funny fat kid in school. Oh, he's more like a Care Bear. Even David and Maeve had to look away for that one when Sarah was saying that at the table, because even they felt uncomfortable in the shit that she was saying about Dean. Now me myself, I wouldn't be able to let that stand, because when it comes to me and mine, I protect them to the hilt, and if anyone's saying anything bad about them to me, I'm going to pull that person up about it, because I'm not going to sit there and chat bad about people. I'm not going to do it, really I'm not. So this is where, as I said, Sarah will show her innocent side. She doesn't want anyone to think that she's a spiteful woman that's being portrayed right about now. But I'm going to say it's in her nature. We all have a part in us that can be dark and dirty. Let's just put it this way. We all have a part in us that could potentially be selfish, that could potentially be spiteful. But it's just how we behave in any given situation in terms of whether we let that shit out or not. And what she did was being hella disrespectful to this man. And he'd done nothing to her. Like nothing to her but exist. Yeah. So Sarah actually says, I don't think I did the disrespect that much, did I? And I was like, wait, what? So as Paul continued to talk to her, this is when the tears started to come. And I thought this is because as well, it was getting a bit too much, because it was rather intense. So I understand where her tears were coming from. And she's partly going to feel that, you know what, she's being attacked by the experts, namely Paul, because she doesn't believe that what she did in that dinner hall was that bad. That's all I'm going to say. I will give it to Sarah though. She does apologise to Dean. But I really don't think that would have been forthcoming if she wasn't pulled to task on the couch by Paul at the end of the day. So he said, like, relationships are a two-way street, and he wanted her to think about, like, how can she be a considerate partner to Dean. All I kept thinking was Dean was looking at her as if to say, what in the fuck did you say at that dinner? All I'm going to say is, mate, you don't want to know. You really don't want to know. You really don't. So Sarah does give her another apology for what was said at the dinner party. And poor Dean is still sitting there like a deer in the headlights. Because he was completely, totally caught off guard by all of this at the end of the day. Because he's sitting there praising her and willing to do the work. And all I'm saying, it must be a slap in the face for this dude at the end of the day. So the decision was made, and Dean, ever optimistic, was going to stay. And I was absolutely shocked that Sarah said stay too. So I was like, okay, maybe there might be a little something there. So as they get off the couch, you can see that Sarah is quite upset, and I don't blame her, to be honest, because as I said, it was intense. So Dean basically says to her, like, do you want to go outside? She does allow him to give her a hug, and that's when she begins to break down. But all I want to say is it's due to the fact that her behaviour was reflected back at her, and I hope that it gave her the kick up the arse that was needed to actually put in changes in the way that she speaks about this man. So then, as I say that, it cuts to Sarah and Dean, like, speaking to the cameras, but separately. So Sarah's basically explaining away what she said. She said what she said because there was no spark there. And I was like, what? What does that mean? So if there was a spark, you wouldn't have said what you said? No. She said she didn't mean it maliciously. But my thing is if your intent is to rip the piss out of someone who you don't find attractive, yeah, then that in part is nefarious intent, because at the end of the day, Sarah was intentional with her words. She knew the impact she was striving for with her words when she was talking to all the people, bar Dean, about how she felt about him. It wasn't a nice watch at the end of the day, because Dean was oblivious to what was happening around him at the end of the day. So Dean says to the cameras, like, hearing that Sarah had disrespected him and caused a red flag. And I thought, mate, Sarah's a red flag walking from the honeymoon at the end of the day. It did hurt Dean, and as I said, you could see that his shine was dwindling because of Sarah, because she's stunting him. So this is why I would have to say that I'm very, very shocked that they both wrote stable. Not so much shocked with Dean, but more so shocked with Sarah. So when they did go back in, Paul did ask if Sarah was okay, you know, just to check in on her. Like, he says that he will always hold people accountable as soon as they sit on that couch. But if she ever has a disagreement with them where she thinks that they're wrong in what they're saying, then he says, by all means, shout it out, pull us up. This did make Sarah feel better, yeah. And I thought, what more can you say? What more can you ask for? It's the proof will be in the pudding as to whether this girl changes or not. So up comes Kia. David had wrote a letter for Kia because he couldn't be there because he was sick. These two literally melt my heart, like, well and truly melt my heart. So David literally told Kia in that letter that he was falling for him, and he basically said that he was staying definitely for Kia, and Kia said, like, stay too. I mean, how could he not? So up next was Lee and Leah. So of course they went through the whole wedding thing. Leah did turn around and says, like, when she first met Lee, she felt in her head, like, you know, that oh my god, she may be this annoying little princess. I'm not going to say a word at all. I'm not saying a word at that. So they asked Lee the same question on how she felt. This girl paused for the longest, and I thought, oh god, here it goes, because she cannot stand a part where she's not digging into this girl at some point at the end of the day. So basically it was a shock for her in terms of meeting Leah, because it's so far from what she would normally go for. Again, I would say what you normally went for didn't necessarily work out for you. That's why you're on this show. So, but on the flip side, what this show failed to recognise is that when it comes to lesbian relationships, there are certain types of women that each person may go for that they do not necessarily deviate from. Yeah, so in picking more of a femme match for Lee, did not take into consideration that she doesn't normally deviate from a Basque presenting woman, because that's what she finds desirable to her. Okay? No matter what you packaged it up in, that's what she defines desirable to her. So Lee said she never felt physically attracted ever to a girly woman, and as I said, that is the fundamental thing for Lee. As I said, it should have been factored into any matches for her, because I would say that the decision making for her was not very inclusive at the end of the day. So Lee said that she has realized, like, you know, that she has shut herself off from being her and being let down by somebody. And I've realised that Lee loves to monopolise the conversation. She just does not start chatting about herself and she at the end of the day. Like, seriously, nobody can get a word in edgewise. So Leah said that basically the worry is how do they then both get to the next step. And it's all well and good that, you know, Leah's found this self-realisation of where she's at. But what does that mean for Leah and their marriage? Paul says, like, think of how you would behave outside of the friend zone and do that. And Leah said, well, that's what I'm doing anyway. Like, I'm trying to do these things, but it just ain't working with Lee. So Lee, of course, has to jump in and invalidate what Leah is saying by saying, but you were always like this anyway. But Leah said, but in terms of trying to make this work, I'm the one that's 100% in. In other words, Lee, you ain't doing shit, is what she's saying. So these two just combat with each other. Like, their communicative styles are absolutely combative. Yeah, it's always like a battle with them. Each and every time I see them on their screens, it's like a one-upmanship with these two. And Leah sometimes can't say anything without Lee interrupting and telling Leah, no, it's this way. You don't do that. Stop doing that. You shouldn't do this. Da 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 da. As I said, I can't say no more. So Lee does validate Leah and say, yes, you are doing these things, but she's saying she is not there yet. So Paul asks Leah, like, if you were out of the friend zone, what would that relationship look like? And Leah says, you know, being more flirty, more tactile, having a snog now and again. And I thought, is that it? Is that it, Leah? Honestly? So Lee said everything that Leah said, she would have done those things if those were natural feelings were there for her, basically. And this is where Lee doesn't get it. Each time she says this to Leah, it comes across as, you're not good enough, you're not what I wanted at all. So she doesn't try. Do you know what I mean? That's how it's coming across to me. And this whole block, I am going to say, is Lee's choice, and no one can tell me any differently. Nobody can tell me any differently, because if she had her type, she would be trying more and more, but she won't. So Leah said basically to Lee, it's not that deep at the end of the day. And Lee talks about, well, I don't want to lead her on. Who says you are? Leah said it won't lead me on. I can have a flirt and a snog. She basically turned around and says that Lee's literally an overthinker, and she's not, which is true. So they come to the decision. They both say stay, of course. So next up we have Anita and Paul. They talk about the wedding. They both had good things to say about the wedding, but then it tapered off into freaking nothingness. And half the time, at this point, I just kept on seeing, well, Paul's basically to blame. But I will say, when I get to the next episode, Paul's not fully to blame for this whole situation between Anita and themselves. Let me just put it that way. But when I talk about the next episode is when I'll talk about that. So Paul thought like he could build off the wedding day, but even then he was being very cryptic. Anita said like she was looking forward to the honeymoon, as Paul is fun to be around. She said that he's fun to be around, but this is where the issues began on the honeymoon. As Anita explains, Paul is a good talker, but when pinning him down for deeper stuff, he deviates and they are miles apart. Paul says like he struggles with opening up emotionally, and he was asked by one of the experts, Charlene I think it was, that when they spoke he was so open. Like, what did he need in that interaction with Anita to become that way? So Paul says, like, when it comes to matters of the heart within a relationship, especially with a woman that he's interested in, he becomes a different beast at the end of the day. And my thing is, on this show, he's going to have to try and change the habit of a lifetime, though. And that's going to be a tall motherfucking ass, because he's 60 years old. He has ingrained freaking habits at this point in time, which are going to be hard to change. As they say, you can't really teach an old dog new tricks, to be honest with you. So Paul says, it sounds like Anita has placed Paul in a box, so then he won't become emotionally available. Anita is right. Like, until Paul finds out what it is that he wants, she can't pull him out of the box that she's placed him in. As she's saying, he's in there because he's on a journey of self-discovery, and she is in this experiment for love. Like, Charlene asks her, can't the two be mutually exclusive? But I don't think it can, because then in essence you're actually asking Anita to hold back in the hopes that Paul can catch up, or learn to catch up with where she is. Paul doesn't understand fully who he is, especially in a marriage. He has nothing really to base it on, and has been closed off for many, many years at the end of the day. So that is a lot that they're asking Anita to work on with this man, to be honest. My thing is okay, she stays, she waits, and then the next week down the line, or some weeks down the line, they're still having the same conversations. What happens then? So they say, like, you know, they talk about how the fact that Anita's moved out of the apartment, and basically Anita's talking about how it was make and break for her at the end of the day, because her premise was he couldn't even say her two children's names, even though he told her, and she felt that Paul was not listening to her. So Anita basically said, is there a point of me pursuing it? Because at the end of the day, Anita's on some kind of magical timeline, basically, of when she thinks things should happen. Paul says he can't remember anything. I'm still going to say he needs to go get that checked out, because the fact that you have to tattoo your own children's name on your arm to remember their names and their dates of birth is absolutely pretty bad. It's not good. It's not good at all. So he basically has a style where he volunteers information, but he turns around and he says, Anita likes to be asked. And I said, yeah, most women do like to be asked, or most people do like to be asked. It shows you're showing an interest. It shows you're showing an interest. This woman volunteered her children's names and talked about her grandchildren, and he still forgot about them. It's a goal figure on that one. So she says, like, she's there for love. She wants a partner in crime. So they ask Paul what it is that you're there for, and he says he wants to find love, he wants to laugh, and he wants to cry with someone. So basically they're on the same page with that in terms of what it is that they want in a marriage or from a partner. So Paul, who's the expert, said, so what's the problem? And basically says that they need to focus on what it is that they both want out of this experiment. And I just thought, Paul, you missed the plot there, because that's not part of the problem. Because Paul doesn't want to commit 100% to the process. He doesn't listen to the needs of Anita, and Anita in turn is placing barriers in place, because she sees Paul as not being interested in her. How do they then get over that hurdle? Yeah, they may be singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of what it is they're looking for a life partner, but it's just not connecting for them. So then as we get to the decisions, then and Anita actually said leave, which didn't surprise me in the slightest. So Paul said, like, he does apologize to Anita for not providing for what she wanted at the start, but he said that he started the journey and he wants to continue the journey, so he wrote stay. And it was at that point all the others clapped and said, yes, Paul. And I'd have to say, in that moment when I saw Anita's face, I felt it for her, because how could you truly be happy for the person that's willing to say when you have a person that doesn't want to? She ain't put that leave on there just to test this man. She actually wanted to leave. I thought it was unfair for the others to clap and applaud him at the end of the day, because then that's not a comfortable space for the other person who knows that now they have to stay and try and make this work when they know it's not going to work. So it's kind of insensitive of the others to do that. It is what I would say. So Anita does say that she's prepared to give Paul a try, but she doesn't sound convinced that Paul will change anyway. So then when they go their separate ways, they're already speaking to the cameras about what it is they took from this session, and they're still both on separate pages. Neither one of them realised or recognised what it is that they have to change to try and meet in the middle to try and make this work. So I'm saying there's still going to be struggles ahead for these two. So next up was Maeve. Jove is still ill. She basically talked about herself and how she felt and how bloody gorgeous Joe was. And she honestly believes that Joe would not find her attractive. And I thought, Maeve, you're bloody gorgeous. I do like Maeve. And she talked about the argument that happened on the honeymoon, and basically she knew that what she was doing, but it's like she couldn't stop herself. And she explains why she doesn't want people to see her in this soft era, basically, because that's who essentially she is. She isn't this hard shell person that she makes out to be. She was grateful basically how it was settled that Joe spoke to her softly, and she didn't want to be nasty to him at all. And she ended up saying that she thinks Joe is too good for her. And she literally showed on that couch how much of a low self-worth and low self-esteem that she really has. And basically that she needs to take time to work on that too, because Joe is not perfect and she's placed Joe on this pedestal. So the experts do tell her that she needs to move on herself. She needs to love on herself more. And she said she can't say what she does love about herself, which was so sad to hear. It really was, because Maeve is a beautiful person. And I'm glad Paul tells her that, you know what, finding your self-worth is more important than your relationship with Joe at the end of the day. And she needs to find that on her journey here. So they both said stay at the end of the day. So next up is Nellie and Stephen. They talk about, like, they're on the same page. They were talking about the wedding and the honeymoon. And Nellie does turn around and talks about her issues with overthinking in terms of her trait. She said she was waiting for something to happen or the other shoe to drop, or she will try to look for something as a negative and then literally zero in on that. Oh, God. All I would say is, like, when you throw something out like that to the universe, yeah, it will come back to you. Like, it honestly will come back to you. But Nelly, as I said, does this due to what she's been through in her past relationships. And this is why I say people need to seek out therapy for real for some of the traumas that they've been through in their relationships, because it's not necessarily fair to put it onto somebody else, especially in an intensive experiment like this. So Stephen basically says, like, you know, the reassurance comes harder for him, as he thinks he believes that he should give Nelly reassurance more consistently, but he has said as well in the past that neediness irks him too. So how he's working through that, I don't know. So the expert is right. They talk about Nelly being kinder to herself, and she does, and Nelly does says that she feels that Stephen is there for her. Okay, so he says it's pleasing to him for her being vulnerable. He likes to give reassurance, he says, through physicality. He believes that Nelly is a little bit more ahead of him, and basically Stephen says on the falling scale that he's near that. So both Nelly and Stephen Wright stay. Mel literally has been really quiet on the couch today, and then Paul was the head of it, but I know something with Mel is going to be coming up very, very soon. Anyway, that's where that episode ended. I'll be back in quick succession with the next episode. As always, I'm Aaron, guys. Please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the notification button so we know when to do videos. Please comment, like, share, and do the good things that you do. And I'll be back in quick succession with the next video. Peace out.